Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to hear more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. Thank you. And also, as a side note, I also do tarot readings. I haven't actually posted any readings on this channel. However, I have been doing a lot of readings through a separate platform that I'd rather not name. However, I do readings, and if you're interested in finding out more about the tarot readings, like I could send you sample readings, feedbacks that I have received so far from clients, pricing lists, etc. And if you're interested in getting a tarot reading from me, you can also email me at the email in the video description. Okay, thank you. And okay, today's topic is going to be another one of those topics that is based on empirical observation. And it is something that, again, has been growing somewhere at the back of my mind, this idea that I've had, this observation, and it's about the Upapada Lagna. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Upapada Lagna is, it's this concept in Vedic astrology by which you can analyze basically the kind of partner that, well, specifically it is designed to see the spouse archetype. However, nowadays, of course, you can look at it to see any kind of romantic relationships, not necessarily just the ones that end up in an official marriage. And yes, if you're interested in finding out more about the Upapada Lagna, I'm not going to get into detail here, but I am going to link a video in the description that I have done a while ago. It's in detail, and it's also how to calculate it and a bunch of examples and interpretations and all that. So I'm going to link that video in the description if you're interested in finding out more about it. But very briefly, for those of you who already know about the Upapada Lagna, how to calculate it, and maybe those who have already seen the video that I made, you probably remember that I mentioned that the second house from the Upapada Lagna shows the durability of the relationship. Okay, so more specifically, the more benefic influence you have on the second house from the Upapada Lagna, the more likely it is for you to be able to maintain a long-lasting relationship. The more malefic influence you have on the second house from the Upapada Lagna, the more likely it is for a relationship or maybe several relationships to end, oftentimes against your will. Okay, so meaning usually the partner ends the relationship. Okay, there are also cases where the spouse might die. I also mentioned these in the Upapada video that I made at length. I'm not going to discuss them because I'm not talking about those situations here. I'm talking mainly about situations where both the partners are still alive, okay, and one or both of them decides to end the relationship. Now, what do I mean by benefic influence? Benefics are the planets. Well, first of all, Jupiter is the greatest benefic. So if you have Jupiter in the second house from the Upapada Lagna, that's a great benefic influence. If the lord of the second house is Jupiter, so if your second house falls in Pisces or Sagittarius, the two signs that are ruled by Jupiter, that's already positive. If there are no malefic influences there, then most likely the overall energy is going to be positive. Okay. And then aside from Jupiter, the other benefics are Moon, Mercury, Venus. Did I forget anyone? I don't think so. Yeah, Moon, Mercury, Venus. Okay, these are the benefics. So, and Jupiter, of course. Jupiter is the greatest benefic. Okay, Mercury is probably the least benefic. It's a mild benefic, but it's still a benefic. Okay, so if your second house from the Upapada receives influence from these planets predominantly, okay, like either these planets are sitting in the second house from the Upapada Lagna, or aspecting the second house from the Upapada Lagna, or they are the lords of the second house from the Upapada, or they're aspecting the lord of the second house from the Upapada. Okay, these are things you want to look at to see how much benefic influence there is. Okay, the more benefic influences you have, the more likely it is that you're going to have a very long lasting relationship. Okay, now conversely, the more negative influence you have on the second house for the Upapada, again, the classical uh, malefics are Mars, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. Okay, Rahu being the north node of the moon, Ketu being the south node of the moon. The sun is also a mild malefic, so I would also put it in this category. However, the sun is not as bad as the other malefics, the Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu. Okay, the more malefics you have influencing the second house from the Upapada Lagna, the same, based on the same criteria that I mentioned previously. Okay, aspect to house, aspect to the Lord of House, sitting in the house itself. These are the main ways. Okay, you might also want to look at the nakshatra of the Lord if you really want to go in detail. The nakshatra of the Lord of the second house from the Upapada Lagna. Remember, I stress this. Okay, so it's not the Lagna, it's not the ascendant, it's the Upapada Lagna. Okay, so the more malefics you have, the more likely it is that a relationship is going to end against your will. Okay, most likely the partner is going to initiate it. It's going to initiate the breakup. Okay, now this is the general theory, and aside from this, something also that is worth mentioning, like I also mentioned in the original video, is there are also some difficult placements for the Lord of the Upapada Lagna itself. Okay, if the Lord of the Upapada Lagna falls in the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th houses from itself, then it is also likely, especially with the 8th and the 12th placements, not so much the 6th, but with the 8th or the 12th, then it's also likely going to cause relationships to end without your initiative being there. Okay, so either, I don't know, or just very painful relationships where, especially when the Lord of the Upapada is in the 8th house from itself, there could be very painful experiences in relationships where just one or both of you just can't take it anymore and you break up. But with the 12th, especially when the Lord of the Upapada Lagna is in the 12th from itself, usually that's a loss. Okay, that's a loss of the relationship, and it's usually not your idea to end the relationship, or even if you do end the relationship, it still feels like a loss to you somehow. Okay, so like, yeah, of course it doesn't mean like it's a curse, but most likely there are going to be at least some painful experiences when you have these placements. Okay, so this exception that I mentioned with respect to the Upapada Lagna Lord being in these houses is something that could potentially offset benefics in the second house from the Upapada. Okay, so like even if you have just benefics, let's say, influencing the second house from the Upapada, if you have these placements, you can still experience, the ending of a relationship without it being your initiative or your idea. Okay, or rather painful breakups. Let me put it like that. Okay. Now, this is the general theory. This is part of what I talked about in that video, and this is the most relevant part. Now, this is what I noticed, though. Okay, you might think that benefics in the second from the Upapada sounds like the perfect scenario, right? Everyone wants to think that they can have long-term relationships. However, what I have noticed through empirical observation, again, of doing a lot of charts, having, again, having some clients that were yeah, one woman in particular actually really made me laugh because I did her reading and then she wrote me back and she said, no, she was actually saying, I don't remember exactly what it was. Was it me or was it her? I don't remember exactly, but like it was something like she asked for a reading, and I said, "Oh, you're gonna have a really long lasting relationship. I can see this because the second house from the Upapada was very strong." And she was immediately wrote back and she said, "What? Where did you see that?" And because my husband, I've been trying to break up with my husband for like several times now, and he just something always ends up happening at the last moment and we make up, or like he convinces me to get back together, whatever. So anyway, I think, yeah, the woman asked for a consultation because she was thinking of considering getting a divorce, actually. Anyway, and this was kind of like one of the last like cherries on top that really got me to think about the subject for this video, which is that because I have seen it so often, actually, where I looked at people's charts, and I know a lot of these cases of people who try to end relationships and the partner doesn't want to let go. Okay. And every single time where I check these situations, usually there's an overwhelming influence of benefics on the second house from the Upapada Lagna. Okay, because here's the thing, most people, I think, at least from what I've noticed, most people usually have a combination of both malefic and benefic influences on the second from the Upapada, which means, again, this could mean, some relationships will end badly for you. Like maybe you will have a heartbreak, the partner will break up with you, but then maybe some of them you will end, whatever. But as long as there's some malefic influence there, a considerable malefic influence, you can end the relationship, okay? Usually no problems, no discussions. But when there's like a lot of positive influence on the second from the Upapada, usually these are cases of like die-hard partners. Like die-hard situations where the partner just doesn't take no for an answer. And I've seen it again so often. Like I can think of a lot of examples off the top of my head. Like again, like this lady that I mentioned, I had a bunch of people who would say things to me like, "Oh, I'm trying to end this relationship and I don't know what to do. Like this partner just doesn't want to break up. Like he keeps convincing me." And to some extent, I wonder at what is really happening there, because it's like, obviously, when you're talking about two adults, at least in the Western world, nobody can force you to stay in a relationship against your will. But something must be happening. I don't know what is going on there, the dynamic exactly, where the partner manages to convince this person back together, back to stay into the relationship or something. I've seen this in the case, for instance, of an acquaintance of mine who has been with her partner for many years. And I think in the past, I don't know how many years, I have lost track already, but there have been, I'm pretty sure, at least 4 or 5 times where she announced, "That's it, I'm breaking up with this person." I am breaking up with this person. I've had enough. And then the next day she would be like, "Never mind, we're not breaking up, we made up again." And it was, again, in her situation, when I checked her chart, she has only benefics on the second house from the Upapada Lagna. One time I remember, actually, in this case, the boyfriend's mother got involved on his behalf and convinced this person to stay in a relationship, which really cracked me up. Like, and again, I'm not really sure what is happening, behind closed doors in these situations. Another case that I know, almost kind of tragic. The person got married young, didn't know the person very well. The person turned out to have pretty serious mental problems. And, basically, I'm not going to say he was diagnosed with something, a disorder. Basically, she wanted to file for divorce after a year because he became a different person after the marriage. Not physically abusive, but pretty much psychologically abusive, and just really overall became a different person, really dark, really depressed, was on medication, etc. And she filed for divorce. He would not sign the divorce papers. I don't remember the full details of this, but it was something like, at one time he threatened to kill her. I think she actually said this afterwards, after the divorce, years after, that she wanted to break up with him several times, but he threatened to kill himself. And she was afraid that he would actually do it because he had this, he was diagnosed with a disorder. He was on medication and all this stuff. And anyway, eventually she finally mustered the courage to leave, and he wouldn't sign the divorce paper. So it um, dragged on. I think it took him like a year to say yes, or to finally sign the papers or something like that. It was like this really difficult situation. And again, in this person's chart, mostly benefics on the second from the Upapada Lagna. And again, and if I have looked at, it's difficult to find celebrities. I have looked at a few, but there are no like huge examples that I could really pinpoint as really great. However, just out of sheer morbid curiosity, I looked at Maurizio Gucci. And Maurizio Gucci, because recently I saw The House of Gucci finally, because, like, it was like this big deal and I wanted to see it. It wasn't that great, but whatever. This is not a movie review. But I was curious because, again, it really, got me thinking to this topic of the die-hard partner. I mean, this was really, it's not a laughing matter, honestly, the poor guy. But it's not a laughing matter, but he was murdered by his wife. And this is definitely a situation where the partner obviously didn't take no for an answer. The reason why she murdered him basically was because she would not grant him the divorce. And of course, you can argue here that there were all kinds of motivations there, of course, money and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the result was that she didn't want to give the divorce, And I looked at his chart, and his Upapada Lagna is in Aquarius, and the second from his Upapada Lagna is in Pisces. It's uninhabited by any planet. It is aspected by the sun by opposition, which is interesting. That is a little bit of a malefic influence. However, there are no major malefic influences. Jupiter is, in a different house. It's not aspected powerfully by any malefic. So mainly, okay, he has a tiny bit of malefic influence because the sun is looking at the second house from the Upapada Lagna, but that's not really a huge amount of malefics, okay? And also, the ruler of the Upapada, Saturn, is in the seventh from the Upapada, which is actually this is actually a placement that shows strong longevity of the relationship. It's not funny, okay? It's not funny. I have a morbid sense of humor, okay? And the sun is in Purva Bhadrapada right now, so give me a break. Maybe that's why I had the urge to talk about this. And yeah, I'm gonna post his chart on the screen. Maybe you can see and maybe get some more ideas. And very interesting example. But anyway, the reason I wanted to make this video, because okay, some of you, again, you might think, well, okay, great. So if I have this situation, if I have only benefics on the second from the Upapada, what am I supposed to do about it? Well, it's something to take into account because you have to be very, very careful, like more careful than the average person, with respect to how fast you allow yourself to trust a person, how fast you allow yourself to live with someone, so be careful about these big milestones in relationship, like moving in, things that could have, let me put it like this, legal consequences, making it official, moving in together, because once you make these big steps, it's going to be much more difficult for you to end the relationship. And of course, it's very important for you to know that because of these placements, it's going to be that much harder for you to break out of this relationship. And it's going, even if you do break out of the relationship, most likely it's going to be with more stress and more pain for you than the average person, because most likely the partner is going to make your life hell. I'm kidding. Of course, it depends. Of course, there are various degrees to this, and of course, it depends on what else is happening in synastry and also in the Upapada chart, Upapada Lagna chart. Um, because again, there could be placements that support this, or there could be placements that do not show any negative impact in your situation on the part of the spouse, at least from the part of the spouse. But yeah, this is something you want to take into account. Okay, so especially, the worst cases, of course, are when you have this placement and you're dealing with issues surrounding sharing custody and these kinds of situations, because the spouse most likely can make your life hell in that situation, really. So yes, this is something to take into account when it comes to the big life decisions like marriage, moving in together. Be careful be careful with these placements. Don't just think to yourself, oh, I'm gonna date someone for fun for a few months and then see how it goes and we're gonna live together, because you don't know how this person's gonna take it, or like how easy it's going to be for you to end this relationship. And again, it's very interesting. I would be very curious to hear maybe from other people's experiences if you notice that you are in this situation, or maybe you know people who have this kind of situation going on, to hear about their experience or your experiences, because I'm very curious to hear if you found that this is accurate for you. Okay. But pretty much this is what I wanted to say. Okay, so once again, if you have found it useful, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post something new. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, astrology or tarot, please email me at the email in the video description. Okay, thank you.